Attacks can't be prevented, but they can be stopped. Modern cyber attackers have already made it inside your network, but you have the upper hand. Find and eradicate threats with ExtraHop network detection and response, and shut them out before real damage is done. Learn the advanced techniques attackers are using and how ExtraHop stops them with a live attack simulation. Register at securityweekly.com/ExtraHop. That's extra HOP. Hey everyone, this is Paul Asadorian with Security Weekly. I'm super excited to tell you about our latest partnership with Intel. Intel's vPro platform, you might have heard of it before, as it's been around for 15 years. IT and security teams have so many challenges, including trying to keep your computers up to date with patches, making sure all the hardware and software is working for your remote employees, and of course, keeping things secure as possible. Intel's vPro platform is designed to do just that, make it easier to keep your fleet of computers well maintained, and as we all know, a well-maintained network is absolutely a more secure network. Join us for an interview with Yasir Rashid, Global Director of Enterprise Client Sales at Intel on May 12th as we explore the features and solutions provided by the Intel vPro platform. Visit securityweekly.com/Intel for more information. Picture your team being able to map out the external attack surface as it grows and see the same attack vectors as a hacker does. Most tools out there do asset discovery, but stop there. Enter Detectify. It takes an inventory of exposed web assets and automates vulnerability testing for security misconfigurations, expiring subdomains, and risks in third-party software. Here's the cool part. They crowdsource payloads from leading ethical hackers. It finds bugs you actually want to fix and finds them in time. Start a free 2-week trial by visiting securityweekly.com/Detectify. Go hack yourself.
Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Don't miss any of your favorite Security Weekly content. Visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to any of our podcast feeds. We've got at least 6 of them, adding more soon, and have all new episodes downloaded right to your phone. You can also join our mailing list, our Discord server, where we chat during the show, and follow us on social media and our streaming platforms, YouTube and Twitch right now. We are live on both of those right at this moment. And if you chat there, we'll see it in the Discord, and vice versa. If we respond in the Discord, you'll see it there. Sam set up that cool stuff. All right, our second interview today is with Dr. Catherine Ullman, joining us from the University of Buffalo. And the topic is about defenders learning offensive security, not to ditch their defense jobs and go be a pen tester, but to make them better defenders. Really interesting topic that I'm looking forward to. She is a senior information security forensic analyst at the University of Buffalo, has over 20 years of experience, and in her current role, she's responsible for a ton of stuff: DFIR work, incident response, intrusion detection, security awareness, and a bunch more, all in a academic university environment, which I'm sure has its own quirks and interesting stories. Welcome to the show, Catherine.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, very much looking forward to this conversation. Near and dear to my heart. I spent around a decade on the defender side as a practitioner. So it's very nostalgic for me to talk to other folks doing similar work that I used to do. I guess getting started here, it's an interesting role. How did you get started doing security at the University of Buffalo in the first place?
So I came to it the way a lot of folks did, I think, from my generation, in that it was very indirect. I didn't go to school for IT at all, but I wound up in an IT role, and I started with the university doing support for workstations and servers, which is, kind of how a lot of us got into it. And over time, they decided that they wanted to have a forensics for compliance program. So because the state of New York that we're in requires the reporting of certain data if something is stolen, or if there's any indications of a breach, they had to know whether or not there had been said breach. And these are in the very early days before we had the kinds of tools that exist now, for alerting. So they wanted to set up this forensics for compliance program. And I had already started doing a little bit of incident response with some colleagues, learning about how to respond to machines that were compromised, infected, whatever. And it was kind of the next step, right? It was to take it all the way through forensics. So I got some training, got some certifications, and started that program, and really had one foot in each role for a little while. And then eventually they brought me in full time into the security office. So that's how I went from not security to security, essentially.
And at some point in that, did you catch the bug where where you just got into the investigation? You're like, enjoying digging into it, knew that this was something you had to learn more about?
Oh, yeah. I mean, as a kid, I was always fascinated with mysteries and any kind of investigative stories. So it wasn't a huge stretch to find this being something that I really enjoyed. And I really wanted to understand it more. And I think that's ultimately why I wound up taking those next steps, right?
Yeah. And you wear a lot of hats here. I think you're one of 4 folks over there. So yep. Naturally, that's something you have to do. I've never been, I think the largest team I've ever been on was 12 people. And wow. usually a lot less than that. So I can definitely empathize with that. So yeah, today, the topic here, I guess maybe that's another point to you that maybe, another bug that didn't hit you first on when you got into security. Right. Tell us a little bit about when you discovered offensive security, and that light bulb went off that, hey, like understanding how hacking works and how attackers think and stuff like that is a huge benefit.
Yeah, so I was very fortunate. One of the things the university did fairly early on, because of a student who graduated through the university's program and ultimately went on, got a master's here in cybersecurity, was really interested in CCDC, which is the cyber collegiate defense competition. And he wanted to form a team because he went once and it was a mediocre experience because he had no idea what to expect. So what was started was this class, which is really more of an independent study called NetDef. And UB NetDef is exactly what it sounds like. It's about learning defense tricks of the trade. And a variety of people came together to start that and to make it happen. And there were people from industry, including folks like Justin Elzy, who works for TrustedSec. And I got to know Justin through that. And Justin had a background in offensive security, and that's really what he was doing. And I started asking questions because, as a defender, it was something I knew, but I wanted to know more about, this mysterious side of things that I really had no exposure to. And he said to me, go to a B-Sides. And I said, what's a B-Sides, right? And that B-Sides was B-Sides Rochester. And I've come full circle because I now run that conference. But that was definitely my first steps was B-Sides Rochester, DerbyCon, and then eventually DEF CON. So it was a real eye-opener. I really felt like I'd fallen down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, and I love hearing you say that too, because, I've seen a lot of folks that get into, yes, pen testing seems very cool and sexy, and a lot of defender practitioner roles are not as much fun on a day-to-day basis. But totally glad to hear you say that, because I having done both myself, because that's what I did immediately after my first 7-8 years as a practitioner. Was I went and became a pen tester and consulted for a number of years, So in hindsight, absolutely, and I did go back to the practitioner role after that, and helped me a ton. In fact, when I went back, the first thing I did day one when I joined that company was an internal pen test on the company, to try and prioritize where we were going to start. What the most essential stuff to do was. So yeah, I mean, how do you implement some of that stuff in your day-to-day role? I think when we were chatting before, you might have mentioned somebody mentioned the term active defender, and just to be clear for people, like we're not talking about hacking back here. That this is just all about, right, like improving, how you prioritize stuff and what you do as a defender.
Yeah, so the idea behind being an active defender, which is just this idea that I've had for a long time, because it really seems to me like most of our roles in defense are often reactive and fairly passive. We watch logs, we see, data fly by, we get notifications that, we have systems that are compromised, but we're not necessarily taking proactive approaches to do things. And I mean, certainly in the environments where you're implementing certain pieces of software that are detecting stuff, right? But that's still not really active in terms of defense, because that's still a reactive sort of thing. So it occurred to me, the more I understood and the more I continue to understand about offensive security and how it works, you begin to get a feel for the kinds of things that you really should be looking for, right? And I started to get very interested in threat hunting, which I've always realized I've always sort of done in small ways. And some of these other concepts, like we do threat modeling, right? And typically when we talk about threat modeling, we're talking about software development. But the reality is we threat model all the time, right? We do threat modeling in various situations as a defender, and your threat models become way more informed if you understand how attacks work. And I realized I don't have the desire to do that all day, right? That's not what I want to do. I want to just apply these ideas. So, for example, when we get a notification about something that's come down the pike, we know attackers are doing certain things, or we know that, Conti has become a massive problem. If I'm looking at the information we're getting about that, I'm looking at those tactics, and I'm going to start looking for evidence of those, what we call TTPs, those tactics, techniques, and procedures the attacker is doing, as opposed to, well, we have this set of IP addresses and we can look to see if, in fact, they've entered our network. Yes, of course, so it's never a bad thing to do. But because I understand that, attackers pivot all the time and their end goal is money, right? I mean, most attackers, and even the ones that are just kind of looking to try to get into something, right? Like they're just curious, they want to do stuff. Most attackers, the end goal is money. And to get money is going to require more than just taking down a specific system, unless they're really focused hard on something for a monetary reason. They're going to try to do things like lateral movement. And while as a traditional defender, you can understand the concept of lateral movement, if you don't know what that's going to look like, if you don't have any concept of, okay, these are the things that the attacker does, so these are what I have to look for, you can't possibly take those steps to hunt for them yourselves, and you can't apply them. So it's really sort of all of those things together, right? So it's elements of understanding, when you get threat intel, what is relevant to my organization, because you know how the attacks works, you know how they're thinking. And another, I think, really important thing that I've learned that I apply all the time is, don't assume controls work the way you think they will, because I talk to other folks in our organization, other organizations who say, well, we have this control in place, so we're good. And I'm like, really? Because that's always the way it works. And that's a huge thing I've learned from offensive security.
All right. So I'm gonna throw my little nerd hat in the ring real quick here. This whole discussion reminds me of Harry Potter when he creates his own defense against the dark arts class, because he's just not getting enough out of the traditional way of doing things, right? And this whole theme seems to, like, I feel like I could write an entire blog post of pen test lesson learned from Harry Potter. But I think, and awesome. Maybe I'll even put on a wizard hat and get out my daughter's little wizard wand.
The wand.
But Exactly. In reality, I think, what's kind of neat is like taking the offensive learnings and applying it to the way that you can defend yourselves, right? And I think that's kind of the key fundamental of knowledge that transfers between defenders and offensive type roles. And I too came from an offensive background early in my career, right? I spent 10 years as an offensive pen tester too. And the result of that was an intimate knowledge of what happens from the outside in vantage point. And that only goes to make you a better defender.
Yep. Absolutely. Exactly the point. I think that, and my biggest, part of the reason I want to talk about this topic is that traditional defenders, and when I say that, I don't just mean the people like me who are in full-time security roles, everybody who's responsible for defense in some capacity. So your sysadmins, your help desk people, your programmers, anybody who is responsible defense on some level, if they don't understand where their role fits in any of this, and they don't understand how attackers are working, how can they possibly help make things better? I mean, you can't, right? You're very limited in terms of what you can do. So yeah, I mean, I think the idea here is, let's open that door. I will be forever grateful for Justin and the folks who opened that door for me and said, hey, check it out. There's all this cool stuff you can learn and this amazing community to learn from.
And I love something you brought up there, the idea of, and we'd actually talked about this in a previous interview. We talked about having a baseline of what normal for your environment looks like. And the fact that you work at a university means your baseline of normal does not look like the baseline of normal that I had when I worked at a large credit card processor. In fact, I would expect they'd look almost 100% different. If you looked at like a packet capture or if you did a scan of the network or something like that. And the way we were describing it in the previous segment was that everybody has weird, so there's every company, every organization, every network has every cloud, for that matter, has their normal weird. Like to anybody coming from the outside, they'd be like, that's really weird. Is this something malicious? Is this something bad? Should I investigate this? And then somebody who's more experienced would say, oh, no, that's normal weird. That's not abnormal weird.
Yeah. And the higher ed space, I mean, trying to get a handle, and I won't begin to say that I have 100% handle on this, right? Nobody can. In the higher ed space, normal is definitely very different. And we're a huge research facility. And so as a result, you have people doing research on all kinds of things. We have a medical school and a dental school, and it really is very different. And I think one of the things that you have to understand to try to work in a place like higher ed is that there's only so much you can do, right? So it's important to realize that you have to focus your efforts in understanding weird in particular environments as opposed to the whole. Because you'll go crazy just trying to think, what's normal for everything? Well, there's normal for this unit. There's normal for this. There's normal for maybe, this set of servers. There is not one normal. And I think that's probably the biggest difference. We're more like a small city than we are like a corporation in many ways.
Yeah, but certainly, when you're doing an investigation, there are a lot of rabbit holes that you can go down if you're looking at stuff for the first time, and it would be the wrong rabbit holes to be spending time on in the midst of an active incident, right?
Yep, absolutely. And the only way you know that is to have spent time there, right? And to kind of get a feel for those things.
So Adrian, real quickly, we have a inbound question from the YouTube watchers, actually. And the question is, today, currently, as opposed to historically, what would you recommend when studying pen testing from the ground up in terms of what route to take with the certification process? Is that still a requirement for success? What certifications would you recommend? Back when I was coming up, everybody set up their own home network. They used it, to target themselves. And, some of us, even older folks, targeted other people in gray areas. Today, what's the best way to come up in pen testing, in your opinion?
That's not really a question that I can answer well, because that's not the area, that's not the space where I live full time. I can tell you that the people that I know tend to believe the OSCP is really the certification.
Sure.
But that's from other people telling me,
Sure.
since that's not the path I'm following. That's certainly what I've been told. I can't say I have heard bad things about other certs, but that's the one I've heard is the
and I would say, besides the certification side of that question, I think the biggest part of it, at least that still rings and remains true from when I was coming up through the ranks, was really focusing on your passion, right? If you're passionate about it, you're going to find ways to spin up VMs, spin up test systems, target yourself, learn the tools, learn the requirements to be able to do what that particular attack model entails. And you can find ways to do it. I mean, back when I was coming up through it, you had no other way to do it but to attack a third-party system, because you couldn't set up your own Unix system when I was coming up. Today, it's super easy to spin up systems that allow you to learn all these techniques and models. And I would say follow your passion, and if you're passionate about doing it, you'll move up over time automatically.
Yeah, and there's amazing things like Hack the Box and Try Hack Me Now that weren't available back then either, right? Which are fantastic resources to start to get a feel for how some of these attacks work as well.
Yeah, in fact, you're involved with some competitions, aren't you?
Yes. So CCDC, which I already mentioned, which is the collegiate cyber defense competition, and then CPTC, which is the pen testing side. I'm involved in that competition as well. So I try to keep both feet grounded in those two different competitions, and they're both college specific for our students who wish to sort of pursue this in some capacity, whether it's for a living or just maybe for their own edification.
Are they just for students there, or are they open to the general public, those competitions?
Nope, just students. And there's students all over the place. I know CPTC, I think, is considered international, and I can't remember if CCDC has gone beyond, but I think it has too. So it's definitely students, but it's more than just here.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. So I'll have to keep that in mind. There's I live in a college town as well. University of Tennessee's their main campus is here in Knoxville. And then we actually had a high school cybersecurity teacher on last week. And I go and talk to his class on a regular basis, and they actually do a lot of competitions as well. That's one of the things that he has his students doing.
Yeah, our NetDev kids I shouldn't call them kids, that's terrible. Our NetDev students also host something called Lockdown, and they do invite in schools from all over the place, and it's sort of a lower level version of CCDC. We have, some of our own undergrads who participate, but who are just very unfamiliar, but we bring in students from different high schools who are part of that as well. So we do try to target younger folks. And then to take it even one step further, we do a cyber camp in the summer that I'm involved in, and I usually do a forensics demo. And that's really the middle school to beginnings of high school age. So we try to entice them all to get involved, because we certainly need the help everywhere.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And that's the reason I wanted to have him on is that's about as early in the talent pipeline as I could go, was with these high school cybersecurity classes. And some of those folks, they go on to college and they're still taking cybersecurity courses. So, might see some of them in the larger industry soon. One thing I wanted to ask you about was, one of the problems I see when I look at how security teams operate is they tend to be very tool focused. They tend to, okay, you're going to be the SIM person, you're going to be the IDS person. Like everybody gets assigned a tool. They come to work, they log into that tool, they click some stuff, they log out, and they go home. And at some point, you're managing a tool. You're not really doing security work anymore. So do you have any thoughts on how teams can get away from that kind of hyper tool focus?
Well, for one thing,
focus?
work in academia because there aren't enough of us.
You can't afford the
go
tools.
To one tool, right? That's not an option. But more broadly, if there's any way that you can shadow with each other, I think, so that you can get a feel for what the tools are doing. One of the things that I think is really important to understand is that we're trying to keep data secure, right? And I think sometimes we get that tunnel focus in a particular tool. And so you do wind up looking at the tool and not thinking about the data and thinking about the systems that have the data flowing into or out of them. And regardless of what system you're looking at, that's really the end goal, right? Is to preserve those systems and the data. So I think it's a combination maybe of, where possible, getting a chance to work with each other and, not necessarily trade jobs, because when somebody gets really, really good, maybe you can cross-train if that's an option. But even if you just spend a little bit of time once a week, couple times a month, whatever your organization allows, to get a feel for what the other people on your team do with those tools and get a sense of what they're seeing. And most importantly, what kind of data can each of those tools see, right? If your SIM can see these types of data, but not these other ones, and you have other tools that can see those. So for example, you might have a SIM that has NetFlow and it might have like DNS data and that kind of stuff, but maybe it doesn't have your Microsoft logs. And so you have somebody else who spends all day in that space. Get a feel for the fact that data is in these different places. And that's one way to do it, is to just shadow the other person in some capacity or other people.
Yeah. So given hindsight, given your experience now, with the offensive side of things, defensive side of things, for folks that, say we've convinced some folks, they're like, okay, I'm going to go learn some offensive stuff. Where would you suggest they start? Would it be a B-Sides? It sounds like that was maybe one of the.
Yeah, I think a B-Sides is a fabulous place to get your feet wet. It was a wonderful experience for me. And you have to walk in there understanding that you literally will be lost in some cases. Some things you'll get, and some things you'll be like, I have no idea what the heck they're talking about. And if it's interesting, if it sounds like something you want to know more about, what I find that's really nice is that most people at B-Sides are super approachable. Not that they're not in other conferences, but B-Sides is small enough that you can stand and talk with somebody. You can get their contact info and you can continue those discussions afterwards. Other places, if you have security meetups, in Buffalo here, we have an InfoSec 716 meetup group, and that is another great opportunity. So if you have security meetup groups, we have folks from the Office of Security side there. If none of those are an option, if you live somewhere where it's really tough to go physically, or maybe you're still dealing with pandemic insecurities, which I completely get, you might try some of the online spaces. So our B-Sides has a Discord channel. There are lots of Discord channels for other B-Sides or these other meetup groups. 2600 is another option for meetings, or if there are local groups within universities, they sometimes have them. Certainly, obviously, Security Weekly has a Discord. Black Hills has one. Trusted Sec has one. There are lots of these kinds of opportunities if in-person is not as easy or comfortable for you.
Security Weekly has one, and we do have people ask a lot of these questions in the Security Weekly Discord. And yeah, so like you, I'm a B-Sides organizer down here in Knoxville, and one of the things I love seeing, and it's kind of a shift for us. At some point I realized, maybe product vendors aren't the best sponsors for a small regional B-Sides. They're not going to get a whole lot of great sales and marketing leads, but companies looking to hire people, local companies. So we started going more that route, and that's worked out really well for us, getting local companies that need security talent, have them sponsor. And a lot of those companies will buy large batches of tickets, and like even outside of security, like big chunks of IT and security will all come to the conference together and share that experience.
And that's one of the wonderful things about a B-Sides, right? So our B-Sides Rochester, partners with the Rochester Institute of Technology. And there are a lot of students graduating from there that go on to do really amazing professional careers, some of which wind up in defense, some of which wind up in offense, some of which, some of whom go on to totally different careers. But because we have that really solid relationship with RIT, we definitely focus on that angle, right? We want students to come out. We want potential employers to come out, and we had the opportunity to bring in some new sponsors this year, but we let them know up front, like, this is a student-focused conference where we try to get in some fantastic names, to come in to speak when we can. We had Leslie Carhart this year as our keynote, which was absolutely amazing. They were, inspirational in all kinds of ways. But you're right. I mean, the fact that the students get a chance to sort of interact with the folks who are in those roles, they're not going to necessarily sell out a product, but they, number one, as you mentioned, have the opportunity to potentially hire some fantastic students, or even just other attendees, right? Because we have attendees who might be job hunting. But I also find sometimes if you know a product and you work somewhere and you heard about it, maybe at a B-Sides, there could be a connection there. If you find out good things about the product, and it might turn into a sale. But you're right. The focus we tend to stay on is the education side.
Awesome. Anything else you want to share or pitch? Any projects you're working on? Anything you want to give a shout out to any classes you're doing or books you're writing, anything like that?
Well, you've hinted at it. So I do have a book that is forthcoming. It will be a Wiley publication. There'll be a lot more information, I would say, in a few months about that. Not that the book will be finished in a few months, but I'm somewhat reluctant to get too far into it until I have a little more content in their hands. But it's definitely in full swing. So that's probably the biggest thing I have going on. I will also make a plug. We have B-Sides Buffalo that a colleague of mine who teaches out of Canisius and works for Security Onion is starting. And this will be the very first B-Sides Buffalo coming up. And, so I wish them the best and hope that they are as successful as we are. We just celebrated our 10th anniversary, although technically our 11th conference because of COVID.
Awesome. And Kathy, I think it would be remiss if we didn't give Flash a shout out. Gus, summon the sloth.
Yay! Oh, it's my little boy, my adopted sloth. Yay.
Lives at the Buffalo Zoo if anybody wants to go visit him.
He is. He absolutely is. And I need to go down there and see him myself. It's been a while.
All right, Kathy, thanks so much for joining us today on Enterprise Security Weekly.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast.
All right, we'll be right back in a few moments with the weekly Enterprise News.